Good morning, and welcome to the Vedanta Society of Greater Houston and our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Om Sarva Jiva Papanasha Karanam Bhaveshwaram Swikritang cha garbhavasa deha pashamidrisham Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Yapitam swalilaya cha yena divya jivanam Tannamami Deva Deva Ramakrishna Mishwaram. Om Shri Vivekanandari Satchishya Supujitaya Shri Sharada Devya Virata Sevitaya Shri Ramakrishna Paramahamsaya Avatara Varishtaya Chate Namaha. We salute Sri Ramakrishna, God of gods and Lord of existence, who of his own free will took on human birth and lived a luminous life of divine play for the destruction of human ills. We salute that incarnation, Paramahamsa Ramakrishna, who was worshipped by pure-hearted disciples like Vivekananda, and who was ceaselessly served by Sri Sharada Devi, the Divine Mother herself. Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriditam Karma Shapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadattatam Bhuvi Grinanti Ye Bhurida Jana. O Lord, your nectar-like words are praised by the wise and full of auspiciousness. They destroy the curse of evil, bring good to those who hear them, and bring new life to those who are scorched by the ills of worldly existence. Magnanimous indeed are they who spread your message. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So this is our first class of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna since the summer break. Last week was supposed to be the first class, but there was suddenly something that had to be taken care of up in Trinity last Thursday, something unexpected, and so the class had to be canceled. So I'm glad to at least be able to start again today. And as I said on Tuesday, I believe it was, I'm really glad to be back giving classes and talks, because that's really the purpose of our being here. That's the purpose of this center and the purpose of my being at the center. So once in a while, we all need a break, but the break is so that we can come back and continue the service that we are dedicated to. So we are on near the top of page 301 in the standard edition of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, the English Gospel. And it's the beginning of Wednesday, October 10th, 1883. And so I'll begin reading here. Being a new day, no introduction is needed. Adhar had invited the master to come to his house on the occasion of the Durga Puja festival. It was the third day of the worship of the Divine Mother. When Sri Ramakrishna arrived at Adhar's house, he found Adhar's friend Sharada, Balaram's father, and Adhar's neighbors and relatives waiting for him. So Adhar was a close devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. We've come across his name many, many times in the first 300 pages of the Gospel that we have read. One of the very frequent names mentioned, people closely associated with Sri Ramakrishna. And he's been to Adhar's house other times in what we've read so far. And so this was the Durga Puja time. Durga Puja falls within the latter half of September or the first half of October normally, sometimes a little later in October, but usually from the first half of the half of September to through the first half or the first 3 weeks of October. Following the lunar months of the Indian calendar. The Indian calendar is a solar calendar that it adjusts to follow the sun every several years, as our own calendar does with leap year. That's what leap year is for, is to come back into tune with the cycle of the sun. But the Indian calendar, like many other calendars in the world, the months follow the cycle of the moon. And so because of that, the dates on the various Indian calendars, they don't fall on the same date with the Western calendar. It moves within the range of a month. And so this was October 10th, Wednesday. It was the third day of the Durga Puja. So I don't know if they considered the first day Shashti or whether they considered the first day Saptami. So it would have been either Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami or Navami. Probably Navami, because the 3 big days of Durga Puja are Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, and then Dashami, so the 4 days. So Sri Ramakrishna had gone to his house for the Durga Puja festival in Bengal, and wherever Bengalis have migrated to, Durga Puja is the biggest festival of the year. In India, there are constant succession of festivals all through the year, but Durga Puja is the biggest, and it's the closest in spirit to our own Christmas celebration. And so it was a grand time in Bengal, at a time when homes that had the means would have the worship of Durga, Mother Durga, and communities, neighborhoods, would have the neighborhood worship of the Durga Puja. And so all over Calcutta and in the villages and all through Bengal, you would find countless images of Durga being worshipped. So Sri Ramakrishna had gone, and it says that a friend of Adhar, Sarada, that doesn't mean the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, Sarada Prasanna, who became Swami Trigunatita, but a lay disciple of, a layman who was a friend of Adhar. Balaram's father, Balaram Basu, Balaram Bose, his father was a strict Vaishnava. And then neighbors and relatives had come. So the master went into the worship hall to see the evening worship. When it was over, he remained standing there in an abstracted mood and sang in praise of the Divine Mother. So, of course, we know Sri Ramakrishna would frequently throughout the day, every day, he would burst into song, he would go into ecstasy. And when it says that he was in an abstracted mood, that means his mind was deeply absorbed in the thought of the Divine Mother, but he still had awareness of the outer world. He wasn't so deep in samadhi that he couldn't stand or couldn't speak. But he was deeply absorbed in the thought and of course, for him, it was not the thought of Mother Durga. That's what we do to try to get absorbed. But for Sri Ramakrishna, he was absorbed in the living presence of the Divine Mother. That's one of the things that makes the Gospel such a wonderful text, because here, page after page, we see someone who was continually aware of the living presence of God. Not the idea of God. He wasn't talking about God. He often is talking to God in the presence of others. And when he's talking of God to others, giving instruction and so forth, it's from his own living experience of the reality of God. So now he's standing in front of the image in an abstracted mood, and he begins to sing. And the song he sings to the Divine Mother is, "Out of my deep affliction, rescue me, O Redeemer. Terrified by the threats of the King of Death am I. Left to myself, I shall perish soon. Save me, oh, save me now, I pray. Mother of all the worlds, thou art the support of mankind. Thou the bewitcher of all, the mother of all that has life. Vrindavan's charming Radha art thou, dearest playmate of Braja's beloved. Blissful comrade of Krishna, wellspring of Krishna's Leela, child of Himalaya, best of the gopis, beloved of Govinda, sacred Ganga, giver of moksha, Shakti, the universe sings thy praise. Thou art the spouse of Shiva, the ever-blessed, the all. Sometimes thou takest form and sometimes art absolute. Eternal beloved of Mahadeva, who can fathom thy infinite glory? So this is one of many songs that Sri Ramakrishna knew to the Divine Mother, and it's beautiful. If you go through line by line, the sentiments expressed are wonderful. That's one of the things in Indian bhajans of whatever region of India, the devotional songs, Sankirtan and bhajans, they're all mystical in their intent and content. In the West, many of our hymns, we have some beautiful Christian hymns, many beautiful Christian hymns. But most of them are not mystical. Most of them are praising God for the beauty of this earth and praising God for being our Redeemer and so forth. And of course, that sentiment is here also, praising Him for praising the Divine Mother as our Redeemer. But most of them are more at a social level and in praise of the beauties of nature. Very few are deeply mystical in their intent. Some are. And certainly in the Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox churches, you find more of that mystical intent. But here, out of my deep affliction, rescue me, O Redeemer. So that is a sentiment that comes spontaneously to the aspirant as we begin to feel closer to God. We begin to realize that I have no one to call my own, not family, not spouse, not children, no one to call my own. Only God is there to call my own. Yes, I may take all care and should take all care of my family, relatives, friends, etc. But I know in my heart of hearts that I have none to call my own really but God. Only one who will never leave me, one who knows me and holds me for what I am, not what they would like me to be. And also God is the only one who has the power really to rescue us from the ills of life. Other things, when yes, we get help from many people in life and in society, and that's a wonderful thing. So it's not to diminish the value of friendship and family and all of that. That certainly gives us support. But it's only God that can really remove the afflictions of life. Others may help us to make minor adjustments so that we can survive. But that's all, just a survival. But God alone can rescue us from the deep affliction of life itself, the existential problem of life that we find ourselves in the midst of, where everything is insufficient, where everything fails to satisfy completely. It only gives us momentary satisfaction, only to leave us empty once again. And so out of my deep affliction, rescue me, O Redeemer. Terrified by the threats of the King of Death am I. Left to myself, I shall perish soon. Save me, oh, save me now, I pray. So I won't go through the whole hymn. But this is the song of one who has not yet realized God, but one who seeks refuge in God, who has realized that I have no other refuge. There is no one else who can save me. I depend completely on God. So if we get to that state where we can say this sincerely, And then with time, when we can hold on to it, it becomes our underlying aspiration. Then we know that we've reached an important plateau in spiritual life. So then in the rest of the hymn, it uses various epithets of the Divine Mother and identifies the Divine Mother with Radha, the beloved of Krishna, identifies the Divine Mother with the Ganga, the Ganges River, identifies her with it names her as the daughter of the Himalaya, which she was, child of Himalaya, Shailaja, daughter of the mountain, Himalaya, and the wife of Shiva, etc. So then it says, the master went to Adhar's drawing room on the second floor and took a seat surrounded by the guests. Still in a mood of divine fervor, he said, "Gentlemen, I have eaten. Now go and enjoy the feast." Unquote. Was the master hinting that the Divine Mother had partaken of Adhar's offering? Did he identify himself with the Divine Mother and therefore say, "I have eaten"? So you see what a strange thing, and this kind of strange statement came from Sri Ramakrishna often, frequently, probably daily and multiple times a day oftentimes, where he has just arrived. He's paid his respects to the Divine Mother, and aware of her living presence, he sings to her. And then he comes upstairs to the parlor and says, "Gentlemen, I have eaten. Now go and enjoy the feast." He hasn't eaten anything, but the food has been offered to the Divine Mother. And so M surmises, and I think correctly, I have no alternative to suggest, and he was there, so he knew the mood of Sri Ramakrishna's statement. He suggests that Sri Ramakrishna was identified with the Divine Mother, one with the Divine Mother. When he said, "I have eaten," he meant I, the Divine Mother, have already been offered my prasad. Now you go and enjoy the feast. So wonderful statement. Remember that, as I've often said, because it's so important, Sri Ramakrishna used to say sometimes that you see here, meaning within himself, there are two, the Divine Mother and her devotee. And so much of Sri Ramakrishna's many of Sri Ramakrishna's statements can be understood to some extent if we remember that sometimes he spoke as the Divine Mother and sometimes he spoke as a devotee of the Divine Mother, and oftentimes as a child of the Divine Mother who knew nothing, but his Divine Mother. But here he seems to have been speaking from his sense of identity with the Divine Mother. Then, addressing the Divine Mother herself, Sri Ramakrishna continued, "Shall I eat, O Mother, or will you eat? O Mother, the very embodiment of the wine of divine bliss." Then M says, "Did the Master look on himself as one with the Divine Mother? Had the Mother incarnated herself as the Son to instruct mankind in the ways of God? Was this why the Master said, 'I have eaten'?" And so again, that same idea. Here he says, "Shall I eat, O Mother?" Again, as the child speaking to its mother, seeing himself as a child speaking to the mother whose presence he saw, he was aware of. He was in the conscious presence of the Divine Mother. "Shall I eat, O Mother, or will you eat?" Again, that confusion between his eating or the Divine Mother's eating. Who is eating? Even that is not clear to him. "O Mother, the very embodiment of the wine of divine bliss." So Sri Ramakrishna has been called by some the Ananda Avatara, the incarnation of divine bliss. And that's a wonderful epithet for him. He was indeed the Ananda Avatara, the incarnation of joy. You find in Sri Ramakrishna that his life was one of ecstasy, of ecstatic joy, and even the periods of his suffering, when he suffered the pangs of separation from God, and then later when he suffered from the desire for his disciples to come to him when they had not yet come. That too was suffering based on that experience of bliss which he had had. And so he indeed was the Ananda Avatara. So had the mother incarnated herself as the son. So here, of course, there is, whether Im was trying to or not, there is, of course, a resonance with the idea of the incarnation of Jesus, that the Father incarnated himself as the Son to teach humankind. And so here he's saying that, or asking, had the Divine Mother incarnated as her Son in order to teach humankind? In that state of divine ecstasy, Sri Ramakrishna saw the 6 centers in his body, the 6 lotuses or chakras, and the Divine Mother dwelling in them. He sang a song to that effect. So it doesn't give the song he sang, but he sang a song to the effect that he was seeing the 6 lotuses, 6 because the Sahasrara, the top lotus, the 1,000-petal lotus on top of the head, is not generally considered a chakra. It's that which transcends the chakras. And so 6, starting from the Muladhara up to the Ajna here. And then this is transcending all of them, so it's not considered one in the system of enumeration. But within each of the lotuses, there is Shiva and the Divine Mother within each of the lotuses. And so here Sri Ramakrishna was, there are those practicing yoga who focus on Shiva within each of the lotuses. In fact, there's a Shiva lingam within in the center of each of the lotuses. But Sri Ramakrishna, being full of the consciousness of the Divine Mother, it's the Divine Mother's presence in each of the lotuses which he is focused on. And of course, there's not a conflict between it being Shiva or the Divine Mother. They're the same reality. But for a devotee of the Mother is everything. So then again he sang another song after the one about the 6 lotuses. My mind is overwhelmed with wonder, pondering the Mother's mystery. Excuse me. Her very name removes the fear of Kala, death himself. Beneath her feet lies Mahakala, the great Shiva, or the great time, or the great death. Why should her hue be Kala, black? So Kala means both time, and also because time is the end of all things, or brings the end of all things, time also, Kala also indicates death. So Kala means time, it means death, and it also means the color black. Why should her hue be Kala, black? That is, he's singing to Kali. Many the forms of black, but she appears astoundingly black. When contemplated in the heart, she lights the lotus that blooms there. So this is a common theme in songs to Kali, where she's blacker than black itself, and yet she illuminates everything. She is the light which illuminates everything. Her form is black, and she is named Kali, the Black One. Blacker than black is she blacker than black is she. Beholding her, man is bewitched forevermore. No other form can he enjoy. Those who have seen a living experience of Mother Kali say that it's the most beautiful form you could imagine. That Kali, when we see images of Kali, she usually looks terrible. And some of the stylized images of Kali, like the image at Dakshineshwar, it's anthropomorphic, but it looks rather strange to unaccustomed eyes. Most people wouldn't, on first glance, call it pretty because it's so stylized. But seeing the living Mother Kali in a vision, extraordinary. It was, in fact, not beautiful, but beauty itself. So her form is black, and she is named Kali the Black One. Blacker than black is she. Beholding her, man is bewitched forevermore. No other form can he enjoy after seeing her. In wonderment asks Ram Prasad, where dwells this woman so amazing? At her mere name, his mind becomes at once absorbed in her, though he has never yet beheld her. So here, Ram Prasad, in this particular song, if we take it literally, he wrote it before he had had the actual direct living experience of the Divine Mother Kali, when he was seeking the Divine Mother Kali. And he says that who is this Kali, whose the mention of whose name sends Ram Prasad into absorption, even though he has never yet seen her. And so that also is speaking of a very blessed state along the spiritual path. Again, there's full enlightenment, which is what our goal is, but it's not that we are here and there's full enlightenment, and in between there's just nothing but struggle and pain and hardship and difficulty trying to get there. And when we get there, then everything is solved. No. Along the way, there are milestones. And so this is one where, which he speaks of, where one has become devoted, even though one has not yet had the vision of God, but one has become so thoroughly devoted that the very mention of the Ishta's name is enough to absorb us. Just hearing the name of the Ishta, we feel joy leaping within the heart. And then M continues, the fear of the devotees flies away if they but seek shelter at the feet of the Divine Mother. That he's referring to the song. Was that why the Master sang the following song? So he's referring to the song which is about to come up. So let me read it again. The fear of the devotees flies away if they but seek shelter at the feet of the Divine Mother. So he's making this statement. Was that why the Master sang the following song? And the song was, I have surrendered my soul at the fearless feet of the Mother. Am I afraid of death anymore? Unto the tuft of hair on my head is tied the almighty mantra, Mother Kali's name. My body I have sold in the marketplace of the world, and with it I have bought Sri Durga's name. Deep within my heart I have planted the name of Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree of heaven. When Yama, king of death, appears, to him I shall open my heart and show it growing there. I have cast out from me my 6 unflagging foes. Ready am I to sail life's sea, crying to Durga victory, that is, joy Durga. So here another beautiful, beautiful song. I have surrendered my soul at the fearless feet of the Mother. Am I afraid of death anymore? So when we begin to feel a sense of surrender, when we begin to feel, and again, long before enlightenment, but when we begin to feel that I've sought everywhere, I've tried everything, and yet now I realize I have no refuge but God. And when we begin to feel that, then we begin to feel no fear of death, because we have surrendered to that which is beyond death, which transcends death. So I have surrendered my soul at the fearless feet of the Mother. Am I afraid of death anymore? Unto the tuft of hair on my head is tied the almighty mantra, Mother Kali's name. The tuft of hair, they get in the tradition in India, the Brahminical tradition, the Brahmin would retain a tuft of hair on the top of the head and the back of the head. So tied to that is Mother Kali's name, speaking figuratively, of course. My body I have sold in the marketplace of the world, and with it I have bought Sri Durga's name, meaning that I have given up the care of this body. It doesn't mean that you don't take the care necessary to live, that you stay clean and you feed yourself and all of that. It doesn't mean that. But it means that excessive care which we pay to the body, the care which makes us spend most of our time every day tending to the body and to its appearance. That has gone, and now I don't care about the body. I just keep it fit so that I can continue to follow my spiritual path. But otherwise, I have sold it in the marketplace of the world. This belongs to the world now. My mind belongs to God. Swami Bhuteshanandaji, whom some of you met, one of the great presidents of the order, who passed away some 20 years or so ago, 21, 22 years ago, 23 years ago, I believe, around 1998, something like that. He passed away, but many years before, he had some sickness that required, or some condition that required an operation. The doctors said that, Maharaj, this is very serious, we have to perform surgery. So he contacted Bellarmut. He was not living at Bellarmut that time. He was not president at that time. And he said, this body belongs to you, meaning to Bellarmut, to the authorities of the order. This is not mine, it belongs to you. So the doctor says this, you say what should be done. And so the authorities said, yes, you must have the surgery. But that's a wonderful attitude, that this is not mine. When I joined the order, I gave it to the order. It doesn't belong to me. Now let whatever happens to it, let it happen. And if you want, you save it. If you don't want to let it go, that doesn't matter to me, because the body I have, as Ram Prasad says, I have sold it in the marketplace of the world. And then the song goes on. Deep within my heart, I have planted the name of Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree of heaven. The wish-fulfilling tree, the Kalpataru of Indian legend, of Indian mythology. The tree, if you stand underneath it, whatever you wish for will be granted to you. And of course, that's a legend which is common around the world. But then the writer of the song says, when Yama, the king of death, appears, to him I shall open my heart and show it growing there. That is the wish-fulfilling tree of which is grown from the name of Kali, meaning that I have no fear of death, because within my heart is the wish-fulfilling tree. I have cast out from me my 6 unflagging foes, the 6 passions. Ready am I to sail life's sea, crying, Joy Durga, victory to Mother Durga. So I'm ready to sail life's sea, that is the sea of samsara. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that if first you acquire devotion to God and then enter the world, then there's no fear for you. And so that's the sentiment here, that now that I have tied Mother Kali's mantra to my heart, I've chanted her name, and the wish-fulfilling tree has grown within my heart. And I have sold my body in the marketplace and purchased with it with the proceeds the Divine Mother's name. So now I'm ready to sail life's sea. Whatever comes, I'm ready for it, because I have that which will protect me from all ills. So then M continues. Sarada, remember Sarada was the friend of Adhar, who was present at the house. Sarada was stricken with grief on account of his son's death. So Adhar had taken him to Dakshineshwar to visit the master. And that we find that many of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna would do that. They had found so much solace and a new life through coming to Sri Ramakrishna, that when they had friends or relatives who were suffering, they would try to take them to Sri Ramakrishna. And of course, everyone is not as sensitive to spirituality as others, and so not all of them benefited. And sometimes Sri Ramakrishna would even tell them, don't bring such people to me anymore. It's useless. It's like blowing on a piece of wet wood, trying to get it to burn. No matter how much you blow with an ember lit underneath the wet wood, it's not going to catch. So Sarada was a devotee of Sri Chaitanya. Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and was inspired with the ideal of Gauranga. Gauranga meaning Sri Chaitanya. Gauranga means he whose body is golden in color. And so here, obviously, Sarada was not one of these people who Sri Ramakrishna found to be useless and devoid of any substance, because looking at him, he was inspired with devotion to Sri Chaitanya, the ideal of this man. So Sri Ramakrishna sang, "Why has my body turned so golden?" Again, this is sung from the standpoint, the words are of the lyrics of this song were written from the standpoint of Sri Chaitanya speaking through this song about his own golden body, because Sri Chaitanya was a devotee of Krishna who was black. And so he says, "Why has my body turned so golden?" Well, also I should mention that Sri Chaitanya was regarded by his followers up to the present day as an incarnation of Krishna. And an incarnation of Radha also. Why has my body turned so golden? It is not time for this to be. Many the ages that must pass before as Gauranga I appear. Here in the age of Dwapara, my sport is not yet at an end. How strange this transformation is. So here he's identifying with Krishna in the Dwapara Yuga, the ancient age when Sri Krishna lived. And because he's identified in his meditation and in his love, in his devotion with Sri Krishna, of whom he is an incarnation, he's thinking, how could it be that I have turned golden? I am Krishna himself. I'm not yet to be golden. That will happen in a distant age. And so he goes on, the peacock glistens all of gold, and golden too the cuckoo gleams. Everything around me here has turned to gold. Naught else appears but gold, whichever way I look. What can it mean, this miracle, that everything I see is gold? So in the next verse, he'll give a meaning to it, but there are probably two meanings to it. One is, as he says in the next verse, that Radha, the beloved of Krishna, the gopi who was the beloved of Krishna, she was golden. Krishna was black and Radha was golden. And Sri Krishna wore golden or yellow robes, and Radha wore blue robes. That is showing that one is within the other, that they were the same reality. Like the yin-yang symbol, where yang has a dot the yang has a dot of black in it, though it's the white half, and yin is the black half, but it has a dot of white in it, showing that the two are part of the same thing. Of course, here at a much higher level than yin and yang, here at the level of reality itself. So another meaning of this is that one begins to see at a high level of spiritual development, everything is golden, because everything one begins to see as consciousness itself. One begins to see that everything shines with the golden light of pure consciousness. So dark blue, what can it mean, this miracle that everything I see is gold? Ah, I can guess its meaning now. Radha has come to Mathura, that is the birthplace of Sri Krishna, and that is why my skin is gold, for she is like the Brahmara, the black bee, and so has given me her hue. Dark blue my body was, but now, yet in the twinkling of an eye, it has turned to gold. Have I become Radha by contemplating her? So that again, as Gauranga identifying with Sri Krishna, now seeing that he has identified with Radha, and that's why he has turned golden. I cannot imagine where I am, in Mathura or Navadvip. Mathura is where Sri Krishna was born, Navadvip where Gauranga was born. But how could this have come to pass? Not yet is Balarama born as Nitai, nor has Narada become Srivas, nor Yashoda as Mother Shachi yet returned. So he's speaking of his associates in his life as Gauranga. So again, because he's absorbed in the thought of Krishna, he thinks that he is Krishna in the ancient age, and feels that how could this happen, because I'm not yet to be Gauranga, the son of Shachi, etc. Then why should I them all, alone assume a golden face. Not yet is Father Nanda born as Jagannatha. So Nanda, the father of Krishna, the adoptive father of Krishna, and Jagannatha, the father of Gauranga. Then why should I be thus transmuted into gold? Perhaps because in Mathura sweet Radha has appeared. My skin has borrowed Gauranga's golden hue. So again, that a beautiful idea of his absorption, such absorption in Sri Krishna that he thinks he is presently Sri Krishna in his incarnation in Mathura and Vrindavan. Sri Ramakrishna sang again, still overpowered with the ideal of Gauranga. Surely Gauranga is lost in a state of blissful ecstasy. In an exuberance of joy, he laughs and weeps and dances and sings. He takes a wood for Vrindavan, the Ganges for the blue Jamuna. Loudly he sobs and weeps. Yet though he is all gold without, he is all black within, black with the blackness of Krishna. So again, that beautiful idea of identity. When one attains to the heights of supreme devotion, which is where Sri Chaitanya lived and where Sri Ramakrishna lived, then everything that one sees reminds one of the beloved. And that you see in Sri Ramakrishna's life as well. When he saw an English boy leaning against a tree with his body bent in three places, he thought of Sri Krishna, who is pictured in such a way with his flute. When he saw a prostitute, he thought of the Divine Mother. And in so many ways that you see that uddipan, that inflaming of religious sentiment, inflaming of ecstasy, with whatever he saw, it would remind him of divine things. The master continued to sing, assuming the attitude of a woman devotee infatuated with love for Gauranga. Why do my neighbors raise such a scandal? Why do they cast aspersions upon me simply because of Gauranga? How can they understand my feelings? How can I ever explain? Can I ever explain at all? Alas, to whom shall I explain it? Ah, but they make me die of shame. Once on a time at the house of Srivas, Gaura, that is Gauranga, was loudly singing the kirtan when, on the ground of the courtyard, falling, he rolled in an ecstasy. I, who was standing near him, seeing him where he lay entranced, was suddenly lost to outward sense, until the wife of Srivas, a close devotee of Chaitanya, received me. Another day in the Bhakta's procession, Gora, that is Gauranga, was sweetly singing the kirtan, clasping the outcasts to himself. He softened the unbelievers' hearts. Through Nadia's marketplace, he chanted Lord Hari's holy name. I followed the throng and from close by caught a glimpse of his golden feet. Once by the Ganges bank he stood, his body bright as the sun and moon, charming all with his beauty. I too had come to fetch some water, and as I looked from one side, my water jar slipped and fell to the ground. My sister-in-law, the gossip, saw me, and now she is spreading it everywhere. So again, this is the song of a woman devotee of Sri Chaitanya who is so ecstatically in love with Sri Chaitanya, not physical love, but the love of the heart, spiritual love for Sri Chaitanya, that it caused scandal because she thought of nothing else but Gauranga. So then M continues, Balaram's father was a Vaishnava. Hence the master also sang of the divine love of the gopis for their beloved Krishna. So here I should explain that Sri Chaitanya himself was a Vaishnava and a worshipper of Vishnu and Krishna, as well as an incarnation of Krishna. And so at first it may seem a little strange that here he's saying that, Sarada was a follower of Sri Chaitanya, and Balaram's father was a Vaishnava. No, it's not to say that one was a Vaishnava and the other was not. But probably I'm guessing that Balaram's father was, I'm not guessing, I know he was a traditional Vaishnava, very orthodox Vaishnava, and his devotion was more towards Sri Krishna, whereas Sarada was devoted to Sri Chaitanya and to Sri Krishna through Chaitanya. So again, Balaram's father was a Vaishnava, hence the master also sang of the divine love of the gopis for their beloved Krishna. He sang, "I have not found my Krishna, O friend, how cheerless my home without him. Ah, if Krishna could only be the hair upon my head, carefully I should braid it then, and deck it with bakul flowers. Carefully I should fashion the braids out of my Krishna hair. Krishna is black, and black is my hair. Black would be one with black. Ah, if Krishna could only be the ring I wear in my nose. Always from my nose he would hang, and my two lips could touch him. But it can never be, alas. Why should I idly dream? Why should Krishna care at all to be the ring in my nose? Ah, if Krishna could only be the bracelets on my arms, always he would cling to my wrists, and proudly I should walk, shaking my bracelets to make them sound, shaking my arms to show them. Down the king's highway I should walk, wearing my Krishna bracelets." So here again, a beautiful song. All of these songs, the Vaishnava songs, are extraordinary for their expression of devotion, their expression of supreme love, their expression of identity with the beloved, with Krishna. One strange thing is that the expressions of love and the expressions of loving identity are so strong in the Vaishnava songs, and yet they are strict dualists. They don't accept non-dualism. And so one would wonder why, with such intense love and such seeking for identity, the black of my hair is one with the black of Krishna, that they would that love would end in non-dual, the non-duality of fulfillment of love, where love and knowledge become the same. And certainly there must have been many Vaishnava saints who attained to that. But as a tradition, they sought to taste sugar and not to become sugar. And so there was always that separation between the devotee and the beloved, even though there must have been great saints who experienced complete absorption and union with the beloved. Perhaps very much like in our parallel situation, there are differences, of course, but a parallel situation with the Christian saints. You find many Christian saints who obviously attained to a non-dual state. If you read their experiences, you see that it was a non-dual state that they attained to through their intense love for Jesus, or their love for God the Father. But Christian theology and the church didn't allow for non-dualism. And so they would have to express themselves carefully to avoid, in the case of Christianity, to avoid actual punishment, severe physical punishment, or even death sometimes. That didn't happen among the Vaishnavas, physical punishment, but certainly it was not allowed in the Vaishnava tradition. They were strictly dualistic. So let me read just a little more. Balaram's father was a wealthy man with estates in different parts of Orissa. An orthodox member of the Vaishnava sect, he had built temples and arranged for distribution of food to the pilgrims at various holy places. He had been spending the last years of his life in Vrindavan. The Vaishnavas, for the most part, are bigoted in their religious views. Some of them harbor malicious feelings towards the followers of Tantra and Vedanta. But Sri Ramakrishna never encouraged such a narrow outlook. According to his teachings, through earnestness and yearning, all lovers of God will ultimately reach the same goal. The master began the conversation in order to broaden the religious views of Balaram's father. So yes, that's true, that in India from the Vedic times, there was an inherent religious pluralistic view, religious liberalism at the heart of Vedic Hinduism and later classical Hinduism, which you see expressed in many, many different ways. But there were sects which were also narrow-minded. And one was many of the Vaishnava sects, because there's more than one. There are a number of Vaishnava sects. The Vaishnava sects tended to be very narrow and think that Krishna is the only way. A devotee or a devotee family, not devotees of Ramakrishna, they were actually self-realization fellowship devotees. But they used to invite me to their home once a month to give a spiritual talk when I lived in San Diego for many years. And so I became very close to the family, very good family, very devoted. And so the wife told me that when she married her husband, she moved from South India, where she was from, to Bombay, where they were living, though they were also South Indians, but living in Bombay. And, oh no, actually they were Maharashtrian. But anyway, she married into this family and moved to Bombay. And her new father-in-law called her aside one day and said, "You see, you have come from a home where God, where the Divine Mother is worshipped, and that's very good. The Divine Mother is very good. That's all right. But now you've come to a Vaishnava family where we worship the real God, Sri Krishna, and so you must give up those other practices and attitudes and worship the real God, the Supreme Lord, who is Sri Krishna." And so, of course, she couldn't say anything, but she didn't do it. But again, the Vaishnavas, the wonderful poetry, wonderful tradition of devotion. But the one thing which Sri Ramakrishna didn't approve of at all was the narrowness which was in many Vaishnava families, where Vaishnavism is the only way to worship God. And I have many other stories I could tell of the same, my own personal acquaintance with the same sort of narrowness. Well, you see, in Sri Ramakrishna's life, he was born in Kamarpukur to Khudiram Chattopadhyay and Chandra, his wife. And there, though they were Vaishnavas, it was a family that itself was religiously liberal. His father worshipped Raghuvir, the image of Rama. He worshipped Shiva. He worshipped Sitala, the Divine Mother. So in their shrine, they had different forms of God that they worshipped. And so Sri Ramakrishna grew up in a family that was religiously liberal. And so let me read just a little bit more so that, oh no, I won't read more because, again, this begins a long conversation with Balaram's father. So next time, I will begin with this paragraph I just read about Balaram's father, introducing Balaram's father, and then Sri Ramakrishna's conversation with the father, trying to broaden his religious outlook. So let me conclude on before I give announcements and ask if there are any questions, on a note connected to what I just said, and that is that about the narrowness that is found in religion around the world, with, of course, exceptions. In Hinduism, the tradition itself is inherently liberal, and so their narrowness is the exception. But in most of the world, narrowness is the rule rather than the exception, and liberality is the exception, religious liberality. So if, as Sri Ramakrishna taught, and as Swami Vivekananda taught, starting at the Parliament of Religions and all through his work in the West, if all religions are true, then what was the need for teaching Sri Ramakrishna's message? If all religions are true, then just let religion continue. Why add a confusing voice, one more voice into the already existing confusion? Just let people do what they're doing. But the problem is that, yes, as Sri Ramakrishna said, anyone, if they follow a religion sincerely, they can come to God, come to the experience of God. And we see that all the great religious traditions have produced men and women who were knowers of God. And so that proves their effectiveness. But that doesn't mean that they're not also tainted as traditions by superstition and narrowness. And so the purpose of teaching the harmony of religions and teaching Vedanta as a possible underpinning of religion itself, not trying to make everyone into a Vedantist, but using Vedanta as a explanation of the religious impulse itself and the different levels of spiritual experience, is necessary because most people think that their path is the only truth. And so our religious views are important. I can follow a narrow religious path, one that hates everybody else, and if I'm sincere, I can come through that path to the experience of God. And then I go beyond that narrowness and everything. I've outgrown all of the limitations of my tradition. But the tradition itself colors society. It has social effects. And so our religious philosophy, religious ideas, all religious ideas have social effects. So Sri Ramakrishna taught religious liberalism in order to broaden people's views. And Swami Vivekananda taught the very philosophy of religion itself, the psychology of religious experience, and the philosophy behind religion itself, in order to broaden our view of religion and to see that the real purpose of religion is the experience of God. The purpose of religion is not to get everyone baptized. The purpose of religion is not to get everyone to say Allah is the only God and that and Muhammad is his prophet. The purpose of religion is not to get everyone to take the three refuges of the Buddhist or to say the Gayatri of the Hindus. The purpose of religion is to realize God. And that most religions don't even know that much. Most religions don't know that the purpose of religion is to realize God. Most religious teaching is that the whole of our teaching is the truth and you have to accept it. And there's some people who attain to the mystical experience, but that's an extra. Just follow the teaching and be a good person, and when you die, you'll go to heaven. And so, no, the religious, the reason for religion, the purpose for religion, if we know that, then everything else in religion falls into its proper place. And so Sri Ramakrishna always went out of his way to broaden people's religious sympathies. And Swami Vivekananda took that idea as taught by Sri Ramakrishna and expanded it into teaching the very meaning of religion itself, which he had seen in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. So that there's the possibility in the future, as these ideas spread, that real religion can spread as opposed to doctrines and creeds and dogmas and all of the limitations of religion and all of the religious fighting and quarreling that has used up so much of the energy of the world and has destroyed whole cultures. So our religious ideas matter. So with that, let me give announcements, and then I'll see if there are any questions, and then we'll close. So for announcements on Sunday at 11 o'clock, the usual time, we will have a talk on Sri Krishna, Incarnation of Divine Delight. That's because a couple of weeks ago we had Krishna Janmashtami, but that happened while we were still closed for the summer. And so I want to have a talk on Sri Krishna, and that will be on Sunday. And that will be live streamed. If you want to attend in person here at the temple, you're most welcome if you register at Eventbrite, because we're doing that now to keep the number of people here in the hall down to 20 so that we can observe social distancing because of the pandemic. But if you're one of the first 20 to register, then you're most welcome to come here in person if you're registered. And we ask that only people who are vaccinated register to come in person, and that you wear a mask when you're here. Next week, Tuesday, we'll have the Katha Upanishad class at 7:30 Tuesday evening. And next Thursday, 11 o'clock, again, we'll continue this class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. The two classes, Tuesday and Thursday, those are live streamed only. But Sunday, we're opening to 20 people at a time for the Sunday service. And each week, you'll have a chance to register through the email that we send out. So now let me ask if there are questions. Yes. Okay, thank you. Are the stages, levels leading up to full enlightenment that you mentioned specifically delineated and the qualities of each described or defined in Vedanta? That's a good question. They are delineated and defined in Vedanta, but the stages, steps are different according to the different path that we might follow. And so there's not one definitive list of steps or stages. It depends on whether you're on the path of knowledge, whether you're on the path of devotion, whether you're on the path of Raja Yoga or meditation and concentration. And also there are differences if you're following the path, a Christian path or a Sufi path or a Buddhist path or a Hindu path. There are differences because just as with a map, we have territory, land, the actual physical geography, the land, or the land, and then we have maps of the land. And so some maps, they may emphasize highways and local roads. Some may only show highways. Some show, and some maps even show only interstates. Some show state highways. Some show local roads. Some don't even show roads, but they show the topography, like the elevations and so forth of the land. And so different maps abstract out from the actual land different features. And so different religious systems have abstracted out for their purposes different features of the complex spiritual dynamics of the path to emphasize certain signposts along the way. So yes, the path is delineated, but you'll find different people delineate it in different ways. So I can't point to one source. And the simplest is just the most abstract Advaita Vedanta, the non-dualistic Vedanta, where it's just identifying with pure consciousness, and everything is just reduced to finding out who you really are. And when you know that, then you've known the truth of Brahman, because the Atman and Brahman are the same. But even in Advaita Vedanta, there are other teachers who show a succession of stages on the way to that. So that's the difficulty in answering the question. The love that we feel for our family is free of conflicts when the love for God is the first and most important love. Yes, that's true. Now, I should say that what is obvious to everyone who has survived childhood, lived long enough to become an adult, that there are always the possibility of conflicts and things in life. But if we have God first, if God is the pole star of our life, then we find that the conflicts that come in life and the misunderstandings, that those we take in stride. And so, yes, in that sense, what you say is true, that the love that we feel for our family is free of conflicts when the love for God is the first and most important love. So yes, when we have that love, then everything else is taken in stride. It doesn't mean that there won't be occasional misunderstandings and so forth. That's the nature of life itself. But you're right that when that love for God is strong, everything else becomes secondary, and it doesn't have the power to throw us off balance. Everything can be resolved through that. One of my teachers used to say that there is a spiritual solution for everything, and the central spiritual solution is to develop love for God, to have the mind fixed on God as the goal, and then other things in life fall into place. So, with that, again, I'm glad to be back to our classes and look forward to seeing you next time. So let me close with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dhrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow in adoration to Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, eternal, infinite, the worshipful Supreme Lord who took human birth out of compassion for all.